I thought I would start by giving a little bit of context around some of the work that I did as part of my PhD to measure the environmental impacts of events. Talk a little bit about what led me to do that work and some of what's going on around measuring environmental impacts of events. Give you a little bit of theory, and then we'll dive into a tool that I developed to measure the carbon footprint of travel. So there's actually been some scholarship that's developed over the last number of years. Brian's alluded to some of the work that's happened here at UBC at the CSS. And I'll just give a couple highlights around what guided my work in this field. Ever since probably Albertville in 1992, the Winter Olympic Games, and then Lillehammer in 1994, there has been a rise of a sort of green consciousness around the Olympic Games. The idea that we could plan Olympic Games with a more of an environmental focus in mind. The Olympic movement has the environment as a pillar, and so it started to really frame up the agenda. It's also no accident that, actually I'll come to that in a second, the Prime Minister of Norway at the time when the Lillehammer Games happened was Gro Harlem Brundtland, who came up with the definition for sustainability that everybody uses. Other researchers have talked about sort of the unique ability for events to engender a sense of community, which then might be able to be leveraged for social change. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more as some of our panelists. I think you all know as well the visibility and outreach of some events can be enormous around the world. And there's something about this, capturing the world's attention or a country's attention in a short moment of time that can lead to significant outreach and visibility. So the question is, can you harness that? And especially around mega events, there's been some literature that's asked, could you actually leverage some of this into positive economic, social, environmental change? Part of the reason that I came into doing this PhD was I'd spent about a decade before coming back to university working in the sport movement, trying to understand at the time what sustainability meant in the sports sector, what carbon footprinting was all about. We were still trying to decide what those terms even meant in the early days. And working with IOC and other federations to help them manage events more sustainably. But we really didn't have a good sense of how you measure environmental impacts and how that actually informed decisions. So there I would still say isn't a strong understanding of environmental impacts to guide decision making. Most events don't use quantitative environmental impact assessment in planning events. It's pretty resource intensive and takes some knowledge. And lots more can be done around both theory and methods to develop how you measure environmental, social, economic impacts. So I decided to look at the environmental impacts when I came to do my PhD and just think about how that would better inform planners to make some decisions. So I just thought I'd give you a fun example of why this can be important. So just going to do a quick poll here. If you compare my commute into UBC by car, by myself from Olympic Village, versus how many coffee cups that would be in terms of the coffee itself and the footprint of the cups, how many do you think that would be?
11.
11 cups. Okay. One more guess. More. 200. Ooh, that's very close. Well, you're halfway there. So yeah, the equivalent for my commute is about 500 plus cups of coffee. But that is only the cup of coffee itself. That's not saying sort of like disposable cup of coffee versus reusable mug. If you're just looking at the relative benefit of disposable, which is actually not very big, you'd have to rewash a cup maybe 200 times before you saw an actual benefit to using it over buying disposable. You'd be talking thousands and thousands. So one of the things that I keep saying is we tend to focus a lot on waste and recycling, when really, if one person didn't commute from home, that would be much more than all of the cups of coffee combined. So getting just a relative sense of impacts really helps you know where you should focus and how you should guide decisions. So how do you measure things like that? I used a tool called life cycle assessment. I won't get into the guts of the methodology too much. Just a couple quick considerations. It's one of the more reliable tools for detailed impacts, and you can use it very well to compare results between events or between two types of impact, like coffee cup and car. There's many types of environmental impacts. We'll focus on climate change today, and it's the one most used in the event sector. But it does rely on significant data collection and planning and a lot of methodological considerations, which I'll talk about in a minute when I show my tool. And what my tool focuses on is this idea, is it doesn't have to be perfect. A rough estimate is enough to inform initial planning and thinking. And I love this quote by George Box. All models are wrong, but some are useful. And if we can just find something useful to plan, that'll help.